Christ Seekers, this is Romuald Simeone, author of Love Letters from Your Father, which is Lexa Divina in the Gospels of John. We're dealing straight with the Bible, giving meditations and insights that Jesus gave to me and in my conversations with him through the years, through 30 years. Love Letters from the Father. This is one of the, today is chapter 10, the Good Shepherd, where Jesus talks about being a shepherd. And it is so exciting because in this point, instead of going right into the gospel itself, we have to talk about, give a preamble. We have to talk about shepherds. We have to talk about sheep. We have to talk about the situation. Otherwise, you cannot understand so completely the great importance of this. This is not just a letter. This is special delivery. This is special delivery what Jesus says, because he connects himself so well to the Father and to the people. And if you understand this particular chapter and how I understood it, it just is so enthralling. So enthralling. It's so connected to the Scriptures, to the New Testament, to the Old Testament, and right where you begin to understand what happened at Christmas time when Jesus was born, that how they were waiting for him, waiting for a sign. The shepherds who were nearby Bethlehem, and all the doors were closed, but they were vigilant. They were the vigilant ones. They were close by. They were coming into Bethlehem and looking up on those towers, and we'll explain all that. Looking up, and they, instead of seeing an enemy, they were always looking out for enemies. They were looking out for animals that were going to destroy the sheep. They were looking out for those that were going to steal the sheep, rustlers. And an angel appears to them. Never before in all of history did such a marvelous thing happen. So to understand chapter 7, we're going to start with Genesis. With Genesis. And talk about shepherding. You know, when we have to get out of this view, first of all, looking at Israel or Palestine or the Holy Land at the time of Jesus, or even now. Some people, we say, well, let's go visit the Holy Land. I've done that. I went to all the places as a evangelist in Israel. It isn't the same place. You can't understand what it was at the time of Jesus, what was at the time of Abraham when he came into that land, the founder of the Jewish faith. He came from Iraq or Mesopotamia, Ur-Kadeoro. And he came as a wanderer, as a person cast out of that land. And what did he come? When he came into the Holy Land, the Canaanites were there. The Philistines had been there. And it was a land of milk and honey then. Later when Moses said, go into the land of milk and honey, what, you go there today, you wonder where the milk and the honey is. It's like a barren land. Some areas are reconstructed and all, but far different from how it was in ancient times. So we're going to start out from Genesis and see what it is to be a shepherd. Of course, Adam was not a shepherd. Adam was the guy who was kicked out of Eden. But when we start talking about the patriarchs and how they were heads of families and wealthy, and how ones who were not wealthy were not shepherds. It was like a nomad land, being nomads, but they weren't nomads like today out in the desert. They were nomads in a very brilliant, luxurious area. Would you believe that at that time, and almost at the time of Jesus himself, that there were lions? Yeah, the Lion of Judah. The expression was not just some symbol. There were lions in Israel, in the Holy Land. There were bears. There were wolves. There were panthers. There were all different animals that loved to attack sheep. But look at the shepherds themselves. Who were the shepherds? The patriarchs. Jacob, Isaac. They were all Abraham, Moses. Well, you say Moses himself was not a shepherd, but he had to protect shepherds. And who were these shepherds? And it's shocking if you think of the modern world that everything is so new. His wife. Sheep would be the dowry of her marriage to Moses. Sheep was the wealth. Those were the banks that had the money. That was the money. In fact, would you believe it, that everything is so exciting? Pecunia, the Latin word for money. Pecunia, what does it mean? It means sheep. They paid salaries in sheep. Sheep was their bank. The more sheep you had, and going over these areas, it wasn't just like a little flock of sheep like we would have today. You know, a shepherd with 10 up to 100 maybe. These covered the land. They were in their thousands. And whoever had the most sheep was the richest man. He was the man of prosperity. So, pecunia. Women, the daughters of the chiefs, of the leaders, were shepherds. See, Mary had a little lamb. Don't think of, you may have a little lamb, but real solid shepherds. And when Moses left the land of Egypt and had to go to save himself, who did he marry? A shepherdess. His father-in-law was a leading man who owned sheep. And he was there not just a short time. He was there 30 years or more until he went back to Egypt. So it was something solid in his life. So the shepherds, so principally at first, were very important people. The owners. So you had the chiefs, the kings, were called shepherds. Later it became sort of a symbol for them to call them shepherds. But they were really factory shepherds. Their sons were shepherds. The sons of Jacob, 12 sons, were shepherds. All except Joseph. He went to Egypt and they didn't have sheep in Egypt. So the rulers and all. So the ancient time, was a luxurious time, a luxuriant time in those lands. Even North Africa, Why would you find oil in Libya at one time? It was like tropical. Archaeologists go to countries like Algeria and look at the caves in the mountains and all. And what do they find? They find pictures of people that were carved in that, hieroglyphics that were carved in there, showing people swimming, which now is the Sahara Desert. So think back, and we go through three different periods. Today is not the way it was the time of Jesus. The time of Jesus wasn't exactly the way it was with the patriarchs. So let's focus now on Jesus' time. So the wealthy, the high class, the people who counted were shepherds. In Jesus' time, a little different. In Jesus' time, almost all the shepherds were hirelings. They didn't own it. They didn't own the sheep. They were sharecroppers. Their whole salary depended on protecting those sheep, finding good pasture for them, being their veterinarians. They had to know how to give birth to those animals. They carried sheep on their shoulders that were weak and helpless. They guided them. They were just about everything. We call in Latin factotums, people who do everything. Yeah. If we want to get a view of who the shepherds were at the time of Jesus, we would say the closest things to cowboys. Only they didn't have cattle. They had sheep. At the time of Jesus, it was very different. They were the lowest class. They were the ignorant ones. They're the ones who couldn't do anything else. When they say about cowboys, they say, what do you need to become a cowboy? He says, well, steal a horse, have the courage to steal a horse and carry a gun and throw a lasso or snap a whip. Didn't require much skill. A lot of determination. And even a lot of them were people who had no good skill. So, in the time of Jesus, here's how it was. People in the towns had some sheep. And you had a person who was a hireling. He wasn't an owner of the sheep. And he'd come and collect the sheep from that family. Whatever they had. 2, 5, 6. And he'd collect as many as he could and make a flock. Bring them out of the towns into the pastures, which were a little difficult to get to. It was not that luxuriant. It was hard to find good pastures. And he was a sharecropper. He had no training, no intelligence, but it was, well, I'd say, it was a big galoot. A person who was brave, determined, not just a camper, but a person who was out there in the fields, not in the fields, in the countryside. He was out of the fields. He was not a farmer. And he was brave enough to protect these sheep. He didn't have much. Sheep were important. They were the clothing. He had sheepskin. Think of John the Baptist. Sheepskin. Somewhat like John the Baptist, who lived out in the desert and was not a shepherd, but the son of a priest. But John the Baptist was like a hermit. And in the cold weather, he had that sheepskin against the fleece against his skin. In the hot weather, he reversed it. That was his clothing. He didn't have much. But he had to have a gun, right? How in the world are you going to kill some animal, a wolf, that comes at your sheep, who are hungry and are willing to tear it apart? Slingshot. Don't think of a slingshot like a toy. Slingshot was the gun. A bullet, a stone, and you swing it, and with terrific force, send it against an animal. Think of David against Goliath. David was a shepherd. Goliath may have had a big spear and a big sword, but that doesn't stop a bullet. One strong stone, which force, going 100 miles an hour, and hitting him in the forehead, killed him. He was shot in the head, Goliath. Doesn't matter how big he was. A shepherd could deal with it. You ever fling a stone at a wolf and kill it? Even, like bears today, you run away from a bear, you can't get away from it. You can't climb a tree, he'll climb right after you. If his other branch will shake you down. Hearing the story of a person right here in Wisconsin, one who was a hunter and tough. The bear came after him. He was scared stiff. He knew he couldn't run. He knew about bears. And he punched him right in the nose. The only place where a bear really has a tender spot. Hit an animal in the open mouth, a growling wolf, with a stone. Shoot it. It's gone. Then, if the animal managed to kill the sheep and you got it away, that was your meat. That was the food for the shepherd. He skinned it, make a coat. Or when little lambs were born and some were weak and died, that was lamb chops. What do they eat? Well, there's an indication of when it talks about John the Baptist and says locusts and honey. Well, locusts are two things. The pod of the carob tree. And those grew. And we know a number of times they're mentioned in Scripture about the carobs. What is the locust tree? a locust tree, it's got all these spindly branches with thorns on them, 2 or 3 inch thorns. And it's a good wood, a very hard wood, very useful, and making things very powerful. But they think sometimes, some say that the Ark of the Covenant was made of acacia wood, which would be the locust tree, tough wood. But the branches, all full of thorns, were useless. They could use them for needles. In fact, when we talk about Jesus being a crown of thorns, the general opinion is that those were acacia thorns. And there's a good indication of it. First would say, well, it's not that one, it's a different kind of plant and all that. And then they talk about some plant with thorns that kind of look like laurel leaves, and if you crown a person and them to look like a king. Well, it's possible. I think very doubtful, though. Because even in Israel, in the garrison of the Antonia, when Jesus got his whipping, and the soldiers mocked him to be a king, and said, he's a king, let's crown him. Well, they had acacia branches there. No good for anything except to burn, to make a fire. They have no other purpose. And they take those, and they usually the artists, would be very artistic, and they show Jesus with a crown of thorns. You say, gee, well, a little painful. Well, the shroud shows something a little different. It shows that the crown of thorns mean like a hat, a king's crown, crowned him. And if they took those and pressed them in with a rod into his skull, they don't have to plate them like a crown or some kind of a hat. Well, maybe like a hat, right on top of his head, and with the thorns, stick it into his head. That's what held it down. And basically that's what the shroud shows. Right into his skull, right through his scalp. So now let's see what these hireling shepherds did. They had to make sort of a corral for the sheep to be protected at night. During the daytime it was clear. They might have had animals like dogs, or they're very careful. They had a staff. Their main weapons were that staff and the slingshot. Sling, not a slingshot. Someone could swing it around and throw it out and stone a person just with a small stone. Shoot him. Then he had a staff. The staff was to guide the sheep. So it was a quick staff on the end, like with a curve on it. Well, that was to grab them, a sheep by the neck and all, and guide them. But its main purpose was a pretty strong staff. Moses had the staff too. The staff was not just for walking. The staff was like a club, like what we say with the Irish, a shillelagh. And so the shepherd had a job. He protected the sheep to see that they didn't wander around, guide them to the pastures, to get them water, and to protect them. We made sort of a corral. There's so many things to say sometimes I go from one point to the other. But make it like a corral for those sheep according to the size, the amount of sheep that he had. It was a smaller amount at the time of Jesus because he was a hireling and he was just collecting sheep around. And for a year out there and coming back like in the winter time, which is probably what the shepherds, why they were close to Bethlehem, coming back, and they saw how many sheep were increased. They increased the sheep at the time. Sheep were out born out in the field. They had to take care of the lambs to make sure that they grew into sheep. And bringing them back, and then they got a portion. They were sharecroppers. They got a portion. That was their salary for the year. And they were poor. But when they made this corral, they would use the branches of the acacia tree. They didn't make it for the fence, to fence them in. And they were protected. The wolves couldn't get through. The thorns and the opening was open. It was like a circle with an opening on one end, because he had to count all the sheep that went in there every night to make sure none were missing, because if they're missing, his pay was going down. If they were wandering, he had to go and find them. He had to bring them back in. And then he blocked that opening. Interesting. In other words, the shepherd himself, counting the sheep to go in, no one could go in or out without going over him. He is blocked the gate. He was the gate. He blocked the opening with his own body. That's where he slept. He guarded the sheep. No wolf could come in. Wolves could not get them because they were in a corral with thorns and all. They had to leap over if he knew or heard the sheep baaing. He would get up and attack the wolf. It was a hard life. So they had all a big job. Rustlers. You think it in cowboy terms, but there were those that stole the sheep. Others wanted the meat. Sheep was valuable. Pecunia. It was your clothing. It was your food. And they were like rustlers, persons who came at night to steal the sheep, club them. If shepherds were there together, close by with each other, in these little corrals, they call out for help. Their companions would come over and attack the thieves. So it was a very hard life. But it's very important to know this part of that the shepherd himself was the gate. And when we talk about Jesus and talk about the good shepherd, he says, he is the gate of the sheep. He knows who comes in and who goes out. He knows what comes in and what comes out. He knows everything about the sheep for their protection. Now, what did the shepherds eat? We mentioned that about John the Baptist. It said locusts. Well, locusts could be two things. It could be the insect, and it could be the pods of the carob tree, also known as the locust tree. You probably know about that. In fact, today if you go into Jerusalem and go to the market, and they have these pods that look like real brown beans, and wide and all, and really delicious. In fact, carob powder is made from them, which is a substitute. We use a substitute for chocolate. But eat them. They're delicious, sweet, delicious, and mentioned again in the Bible in other places. When the prodigal son, after he squandered all his money, and apparently was living in a pagan land, he was a playboy in the pagan land, squandering his inheritance, going out with the whoopee women, and then when his money was gone, everybody abandoned him. Because if they're out for your money, that's what happens. If people are interested in you only because of your money and proclaim you, when the money runs out, they run out. So it says the only work he could get was to take care of pigs. Well, that means clearly he was in a pagan land. There were no pigs, and pork was not allowed to be eaten in the Holy Land. And it says he ate the pods that were given to the pigs. Yeah, the rotten carob pod. He had to eat the ones that were rotten, that were given out, because the other ones were put in the marketplace and eaten by humans. Well, everyone's human, but eaten by the people. They're nourishing. Then, of course, it could be the insect. I don't know if you ever ate a locust. I'm sure you didn't, but I did. When I was out in Thailand, and I was doing missionary work with the Archbishop of Keon in Thailand, the Archbishop of Taray, and wandering around there, and I was helping out and trying to help missionaries who were in the villages, Redemptorist fathers, and when they were, people were surprised that coming in and a yank and giving them, teaching them something or learning. I was always trying to learn people's cultures because I was teaching cultures. And one time I was there in one of the villages, and the school, nothing like a present school, just a big hut, and the walls were panels of palm leaves, and they take them off, and then so the breeze can come through and won't be so hot. And I'm there, and I'm talking to them, and they want these. This is only like 40 years ago, 45 years ago, and so they want to know everything about America. Of course, Thailand is much more modern today, but these young people, and the missionary there was translating for me. And as I'm talking to them, all of a sudden, swarm of locusts comes in. Actually, they're not strictly locusts, they're cicadas, the 7-year locusts. They're in the ground for 7 years, then they pop out, and they're nice and big and fat, and they're going to produce all these pregnant cicadas. And they're flying through the window, not through the window, from one area of that so-called schoolroom to the others. And all these young native Thais out in the jungle area, bamboo jungle, and they start getting them and stuffing them in their mouths as they're flying, just grabbing them out of the air and stuffing them in their mouths. And I said, what's happening? I said, to the missionary. And I says, they're getting distracted. He says, distracted? He says, if you were back in America and Hershey bars were flying through the windows and people were grabbing them and stuffing them in their mouths, would you think they'd be distracted? This is their protein. And they eat them roasted. I tried that. Say when you're hungry enough, you can swallow anything. They're pretty tasty. Nutty flavor, but very good protein. And probably these shepherds also ate those. Roasted. Locusts. Locusts come into a good prosperous land and the wheat fields and all that. Get them. You ever go out in Kansas where the locusts come through and boy, the chickens have a feast day. But that's it. So they ate herbs, pastures. It's not all grass. There's dandelions. There's honey, trees, the bees, wild honey. If a bear can get it, you can get it. And lamb. So they weren't so bad off. They were nice, husky fellows. So they also, in the groups, if they were in groups, they'd put up a tower. Nothing fancy. It's talked about in the scriptures. A tower so they could look out for the marauders who would come to try to steal the sheep, and for wolves. They take turns, like lookouts of soldiers, and warn the others, and call them out of their sleep to protect them. No, in the litany it calls Jesus Tower of David. David was a shepherd. He knew about towers. Look up, tower, no trees out there. Build a tower up there. And look out to be vigilant. It was always important to be vigilant. To be vigilant. To know exactly who was in your flock and who was out of the flock. So that's the sheepfold. That's the gate. And you keep watch. Now what about the sheep themselves? Actually, they're very prolific. Not as prolific as rabbits, but they're prolific. They eat well, and the rams are there. They're going to have a lot of babies. It's something like, how many bulls do you need in a pasture of cows? One's pretty active. And you had to control these rams because that's another little danger that the shepherd had. He had to keep good control over a ram. You had to check him out. If you had an animal or a dog, check out that ram because he could come back at you. If he's after some of the ewes and you try to stop him, you're going to have a hard time. Ram was also a symbol for a ramming rod that the Romans used to break down a city gate. Because it could be very vicious. So you had to be careful about that. Now, animal that is a sheep is very gentle. It's got a lot of problems, and problem is he's like a child. He's a childish child. I won't say he's like a person that is retarded, but that says it pretty much for a sheep. Sheep Really doesn't know which way to go. Doesn't know who his friends are. Doesn't know. He puts himself in danger. He goes wandering around. If you don't keep him into a flock, he'll go wandering around. He gets himself caught in the brambles. He can't get out. There's running water. When you read Psalm 23, it talks about some of their stupidity is something good, why they need protection. They're very dependent. Very dependent. They are victims. The predators are after them. But they're very dependent. They don't know which way to go. It's just about impossible for them to protect themselves. Only the rams are capable of that. They don't run that fast. And look at this point. In regard to getting a drink of water, when I was in Australia, went out bush, and the sheep ranches, or they call them sheep stations, they asked them about the sheep, taking care of the sheep, these shepherds out there. And they said, you know what? They're so stupid that if we have a drought and they are thirsty, we have to find water for them. They just stand there and they bah, bah, bah. They have to drink every day. They can't hold water in their stomachs like camels do. They need water every day. But if a downpour of rain comes in and also there's a storm, and the areas could practically flood it, and they lie there because the rain gets into their wool, and they can't even walk. They roll over, and they got their mouths right near a puddle of water, and they don't drink. And the shepherd has got to come in and throw water with his hand, flush water into his mouth. Then he knows he has to drink. If he goes to a stream, why does it say in the psalm, still water? Come by still water. Why? Go in a stream, rushing water, it's dangerous for him. He slips in, and his wool becomes a burden. It fills up with water. He can't get out of the water. He'll drown. Keep him away from the rushing waters. Take it easy with him. He's not one like a dog or a horse get in the water and try to swim. The dog just paddles away. Not a sheep. He's waterlogged, and he'll drown. So how did these shepherds get pools of water? If there were pools of water, good. Still water. Or the wells. There were wells out there. The different towns had wells. The different areas had wells. Along the roads, they had wells. And I never saw it in a picture, in a photograph, because they don't have the sheep out there now. But there was like a trough next to the well. Right? Talks about Jacob's well, where Jesus went to the woman at the well. There would be a trough there if people had sheep next to the well. Pull that water up and water the sheep. The woman talks about Jacob made that well for our animals so we can drink here. But that well was almost 100 feet down. You had to pull up the water. And it didn't make get your water from a jar, lap it up. They'd lap it up from a trough, still water. Now, you kind of get the idea that sheep is stupid, but he's also very loving. He's gentle, he's patient, and really easy to make a friend. And one thing he does know, he knows the master's voice. It's not, we say, not only the master's voice, but those shepherds used to have a reed, some stick or something that was put holes in it and make like a flute. And they had special calls. If they had put them all together, like a shepherd's horn, you ever see that? Sort of triangular. And he'd play on it. And that also kept the sheep calm. When the wolf came around and the sheep would tend to panic and run away, if he heard the shepherd's horn, he'd come to the shepherd. I know mine and mine know me. They come when they hear my voice. So, actually, a lamb, sheep, practically fall in love with their masters. They come when they call. They know they're going to get water. They know they're going to get pasturing. They're gentle. They're kind. They're loving. They're like fluffy dogs. Big poodles. But remember, they're like children. And they're childish children. A childish child, what's so great about children? They're so loving. When you're good to them, they're grateful. When you love them and you do things for them. Why is it that we're always so intent on mothers? Mothers, even mothers that were poor, go to any country in the world. I've been in a number of countries. And always the children are attached to their mothers. It's not just the animals that are attached to their mothers. Not just a little baby monkey that hangs on to its mother. That's cute. But that's where a baby needs hanging too, against his mother's breast. Threaten a child, even if a father is mean to the child, runs to mama, jump into her arms. And that's the way sheep are. They, like little children, they show a lot of love, and they always come to the person who's good to them. Like dogs who don't go away from the master. They listen to the master. But they don't bark and try to get other people away. So they're not stupid. They're also very peaceful. The symbol of peace. One thing I have to say about it is that the Egyptians, when they went to Egypt and saw the shafts where they had all these hieroglyphics, Cleopatra's needle and things like that, the Egyptians had no regard for sheep. They were not shepherds. They were different. They had the wheat. They made the bread. They made the beer. They lived it up. When there was a famine in other places, people had to go to Egypt. It was the breadbasket for the Roman Empire, for Rome. Julius Caesar took Egypt and made it a Roman province. That was the wheat basket for Italy, for the Romans. Caesar, give us wheat circuses. Give us bread and circuses. It was the bread basket of the area. Sheep were not valuable there. And they had all these different animals that they admired and mummified. You don't find sheep. And that is a symbol too. They wanted horses. They wanted crocodiles. They honored the crocodile. We call it dragon, symbol of Satan. The Egyptians were not lovers of shepherds. You know what they did with people that love sheep? What they did with the Jews. They were the abusers of peaceful people. Think about how they went to the Red Sea. After all they had done against the Jews, all that Moses had said to let his people go, they had second thoughts. Even after his own son was killed, the Pharaoh sent the army, get those people back. We have to build these pyramids. Well, we need slave labor for the builders of the pyramids. You say, well, they didn't build the pyramids. They need slave labor. Move those rocks. And bring those Jews back. They went with their chariots. The chariots, what were they? They were the military vehicles of the soldiers. No, the Egyptians did not admire sheep or people who were like sheep. So many countries always keep saying, we want to be peaceful with everybody. But the reason that there is no peace is because some people want to enslave the sheep. Enslavement is nothing new. So let's go to the question of Jesus. When Jesus said that he was a good shepherd, I'll tell you, not so. The Hebrew word for it was abir. He was the head shepherd, the chief shepherd. No one can properly be hired except with Jesus. To become a shepherd, you have to be like Jesus. He wasn't just good. He was perfect. He was perfect. Everything you say about shepherds that is good was with Jesus. Mighty King, faithful, perfect, and not just so he could benefit from us. It's the Son of God. He doesn't need the sheep. It's completely, just about completely one way. He cares for the sheep. He's concerned for the sheep. He will die for the sheep. He will protect the sheep. He is the complete head. The abir comes from the word Abba, Father. He's the father of the sheep, not just a protector. One thing he is not, he's not a hireling. He doesn't run away. He doesn't put sheep, shear the sheep for his own advantage. He gives It's always giving. You say this a number of times. God, Jesus, is the giver of life. He's the giver. We're not giving anything to God except our sins. The only thing that we have that didn't come from Him. And He says, I'll take those too. I'll take those too. But trust me, that I will take them and turn them around. Though you are red with sin, I will cleanse you. Remember, they washed the sheep too. Keep that wool clean. It's going to be our clothing. Cleanse you and make you white as snow. I don't like that for Scripture. There was no snow there. White as a fleece. White as a fleece. Absorb me. I am the water. Put out a fleece, let it absorb me. I won't drown you. I'll save you. I'm going to lift you up. So remember, when we say the good shepherd, we mean the chief shepherd, the only chief, the head shepherd, the one who is the image of the Father shepherd. Because it's not just sheep He's taking care of, it's His own children. From here on, we go right to the Scriptures, and we'll talk about the Good Shepherd. And now you can understand it. It is not only the Good Shepherd that is speaking, but it's a parable. It's symbolic, but these symbols are facts. Meditate on this. Talk to Jesus, the Good Shepherd. Open up John's Gospel to chapter 10 and read it and prepare and put yourself into it. Remember, you are the sheep. And even if you're a black sheep, He'll make you white as snow. We all have some streaks of black in us. We all have going away from Him. If we receive from Him, let's help to give back to the other sheep. We know, all of us know of sheep that have left the pasture. We all know of sheep that have left the protection of Jesus. We all know those who are in danger and who mix in with the wolves and think that the wolves are shepherds. God bless you, and pray for me.